can be hard to know where to start with a guitar. Initially, some of the chords can look daunting and far too complicated, but there is an order and a trick you can apply to this that makes the process of entering the world of guitar chords easier and far more enjoyable. A very common starting point and great first chord is E minor. Very beginner friendly, just 2 fingers on 2 strings on the 2nd fret. Whenever you're playing your guitar chords, make sure you're using the tips of your fingers so you can allow that curve in the knuckle to come through. So if there's any strings underneath that might be open, like in this E minor chord, we have an open G. If we was bending that 2nd finger down, it would mute that G, and that's not what we want. So form your E minor, 1st and 2nd finger onto the 2nd fret of the A and the D string, tucked up nice and close to that 2nd fret. We're strumming through all 6 strings, nice and loose with our right hand. Wrist is quite low to allow those open strings, the E, B and G, to ring through. Thumb's not too far over the top because we don't want to restrict the movement of our wrist, so that drops down a little bit to allow that curve and everything else to ring through. We can move then to an A minor, great 2nd chord to have. And the beauty with this is your 2nd finger doesn't need to leave the fretboard. And this is one of the big things we're going to be focusing on. That finger that doesn't leave the fretboard is called an anchor. Our 2nd finger on the 2nd fret of the D string, it's there for the E minor, it's still there for the A minor. That's called an anchor. And then our 1st and our 3rd finger just fall around that. From the E minor, our 1st finger goes to the 1st fret of the B string, and our 3rd finger goes underneath the 2nd onto the 2nd fret of the G. Thumb now comes up, wrist comes closer, we mute that low E. Curve in the 1st finger, again really important because it allows that open E to come through. We have an A minor chord, beautiful moody sound. E minor to A minor. Try not to be too tense when you're playing guitar. Shoulders nice and loose. If you're really tensed up, that's going to be reflected in the way that your hand is forming these shapes, and you don't want to end up with any of those aches and pains further down the road. Next chord I recommend, F major. Let's move from our A minor, across to F major. Notice there was another anchor. Our 1st finger didn't leave the fretboard. A minor, F major. 3rd finger goes onto the 3rd fret of the D. 2nd finger is on the 2nd fret of the G. And our 1st finger stays where it was from the chord before, on the 1st fret of the B. Our 1st finger still got that curve in the knuckle, but it relaxes a little bit, so it can mute that high E. We don't want that coming through yet. We can use that in a little while. Thumbs come a little bit further over the top. It's now doing the job of muting the low E and the A. Or the 3rd finger can mute that A. If you can't get your thumb over the top, if that's a bit of a struggle, don't worry. The pad of your 3rd finger, while it's pressing down on the D, can mute that A string. Or if you can get your thumb over, you can do both. 4th chord, we've got that anchor again. We move up to a C major. 1st finger didn't leave. It just came a little bit more onto the tip of the 1st finger to allow that high E to ring through now. The 2nd and 3rd finger just move up in unison. So instead of being on the G and the D, they're now on the D and the A. 2nd finger, 2nd fret of the D. 3rd finger, 3rd fret of the A. We have a C major. C major is commonly a chord that people struggle with, and if you were to throw yourself into playing that chord straight away, I think the stretch in your fingers and the ability of the pressure that you're able to apply would struggle a little bit, for a lot of people anyway, and that's not a problem, that's very common. But if you build towards chords like that, starting with our E minor, down to an A minor, working on that stretch to get across to the F major, once you've nailed that, it's such a simple move. Up to your C major. Suddenly, those chords become a lot more accessible. To resolve that progression from the C major, we can go back to our E minor. Our 2nd finger was our anchor that time. Lovely. Let's go around again and add a little change. Start with our E minor. All 6 strings coming through. Down to our A minor. This time, we're going to go across to an F major 7 over C. Don't worry, it's not as complicated as it sounds. We was doing our standard F major, 3 strings coming through. This time from the A minor, we're going to move our 2nd finger down like we did before. 1st finger stays in our anchor position. 3rd finger this time comes up to the 3rd fret of the A string, and our little finger plays the 3rd fret of the D string. We've now put a C note. Recognise that from the C major chord? We've put a C note at the top of the F major chord. We're playing an F major chord over the note C. So that's where the F major over C comes in. And now our first finger, instead of being on that angle to mute the low E, the high E, sorry, it now comes onto its tip, allows that high E to ring through, and it's the 7th note. E is the 7th note of F major. F, G, A, B flat, C, D, E. We've put the 7th note into this chord, F major 7 over C. This now links even easier to your C major chord. You've just got to move that one finger up. That second finger comes up to the 2nd fret of the D, and the little finger comes off, because your 3rd finger is already playing that bassier note, that's C. Up to our C major. If you're familiar with Half the World Away by Oasis, or you've ever watched the UK programme The Royal Family, you will recognise these two chords from that standout song. Couple of other little bits thrown in there, the rundown and the D major. I'll stick that in the tabs if you're interested. If you throw a G major chord into the mix, a little bit trickier, but let's have a go. First finger goes to the 2nd fret of the A. 2nd finger goes above onto the 3rd fret of the low E. D and G are open. 3rd finger goes to the 3rd fret of the D. The little finger tucks underneath to the 3rd fret of the E. G major. If you learn that chord, you've then got a Beatles classic, Let It Be. I'll put that in the tabs as well. With just a few chords, you can open up a ton of possibilities on your guitar. There's 2 quick examples of songs there, but there are hundreds, thousands more for you to go and research. Now you've got those chords, look for familiar, popular songs, and I guarantee you will find something that you like that will contain a mix of these chords. When you start to learn other chords as well, look for those anchor options. We've focused on a few there. If you're learning that D major, when you go to an A major, your first finger doesn't leave the fretboard. You move from an A major to an E major, your first finger only has to slide back 1 fret. It then slides back in for an A major, and then it stays on the same fret for a D major again. If you was then to go from the D major up to the G major, your 3rd finger doesn't leave the fret. And whenever you're moving through chords, don't move your fingers too far away from the fretboard. An A minor to F is a good example. If you're moving your fingers this far away, all they've got to do is travel back even further. So keep everything nice and close. You don't want to be muting and interfering with the strings, but if you can keep your fingers close while you're making these changes, not pulling them far away, all your transitions will happen a lot easier, a lot quicker, and a lot smoother. You want to open up the fretboard even more, that F major 7 over C. Relax your first finger again to mute that high E. Just move that shape. You've opened up the whole fretboard. That shape can be played anywhere. Don't overwhelm yourself with too much theory when you're starting your guitar journey like this. Just enjoy that process. Trust your ear. See what you can create. See what happy accidents happen. And I guarantee you will have so much fun exploring the neck, the possibilities, and the things that you can create with your own unique creative expression. Another way to open the fretboard up with those chords that you've learned is to put a capo on. Let's take the 3rd fret, for example. The capo is effectively just replacing those open strings. Where you would have an open string before, we have now got the capo. It has made the neck shorter, it has taken away the 1st, 2nd fret, we have put it over the 3rd fret. Those shapes that you've just learned, E minor, A minor, F, or F major 7 over C, up to a C major, they are still applicable. Treat the capo as your open string, the 4th fret now becomes your 1st fret, the 5th fret now becomes your 2nd, and the 6th fret now becomes your 3rd, effectively. So they're the same shapes, E minor, A minor, F major, C major, but if you was to use your chromatic scale, which is popping up on the screen now, without the capo, we had a C major. If we've moved that up 3, we've got C sharp, D, D sharp, D sharp major. We look at a big mix of chords and their possibilities in the free beginner guitar course that I've created. And obviously in those courses, I go into a lot more detail of every aspect, and we work at a slower pace. You're able to adjust to a pace that works for you. So if you're interested in learning more about chords, some classic riffs and songs, finger exercises that will improve your overall playing ability, then check the link below, completely free of charge. Now you've got some essential chords in place, you're going to want to learn the best way to practice and the techniques that will help you play like the pros. So check this video next for a big mix of exercises and tips that will really help you kick on. Massive thank you for checking out this video. I'll hopefully catch you in another one soon. Take care.